Hey my friends, I am Aureolin Louise and I'm a watercolor painter and teacher from New Mexico. In this video I'm going to walk you through how I paint a simple purple cosmo, and I will let you know the supplies I use and the steps I use to create it from start to finish. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start by just drawing a center kind of circular shape, and I'm using an F pencil. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 8 petals. So I want you to make the ends a little bit ruffled. And we're going to just try and evenly kind of space them out. For this one here, I'm going to make the end curl inward just a little bit. So the outer edge is smooth, and then just inside of that line you add a little bit of wave. So now it looks like that petal is curling inward. One normal petal, let's do another one that's curling. So a smooth outer line, and then that curling inward. And then I'll do the same thing on this one too. So just a little bit of an inward curl for these 3 petals. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 petals. They feel nice and balanced. And then I'm going to switch over to some paints. So let me see here, what brush do I want to use? I'm going to use I'm just going to use a size 6 Cotman round brush, and I have some water over here, and I have all my favorite colors. So I think the color I'm going to use today, so cosmos are usually kind of like a purple pink color, so I think I might do a little bit of color mixing. So first I'm going to clear a little bit of space on my super messy palette. Just need a little bit of room. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of alizarin crimson. Pull it down so you can see. So I'm just activating that color, bring it right here to this clean spot. And I'm going to also grab a little bit of Winsor violet. And let's mix those two together. It should create a really beautiful fuchsia color. You can lean a little heavier on the alizarin crimson or a little bit heavier on the Winsor violet side. I think I want to lean heavier on the alizarin crimson. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is just using, this is called a wet on dry technique. I'm going to just lay that paint right on the dry paper, just using the tip of that brush. And go ahead and do the same thing for all 8 petals. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just use a paper towel. I'm going to lift a little bit of color out of the tip of that leaf, or that petal that's curling inward. Okay. This is a very soothing process. I love doing this. This is called a wash of color. So I'm not doing any details. Not really trying to bring any form into the painting yet. We're just doing a pretty solid, even layer of paint. So we call that a paint wash. All right. Okay, so I'm going to give that a moment to dry. Okay, so now that this is all dry, I'm going to clean my brush off and I'm going to grab some Aureolin Yellow. If you don't have that color, you can use a color called Lemon Yellow. Just use a light yellow and we're going to just drop some color here in the very center. And then we'll let that dry. So while that's drying, go ahead and let's go back to our petals. So let's grab some of our purple pink mixture. So I'm just adding a little bit of color because I actually used quite a bit of it. Okay, so this is kind of a fun part here. So I'm going to use just the tip of this brush and I'll go ahead and start over here. I'm going to drop a little bit of darker color. So we're just layering on color here. I'm going to drop some darker color just underneath this petal where it curls inward. So it's kind of like there's a cast shadow now. Go ahead and do the same thing on this third petal that has the curl in it. Okay, so now I'm going to use the tip of my brush. I'm actually going to switch. I'm going to switch to a size, I think this is a size 1 brush. I've had it for so many years that I can't even read what it is anymore. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some veins using kind of a dry application here. So there's not a whole lot of water in this mixture here. So they call this kind of a dry brush, not super watery. Using a small brush really gives you a lot of control. So you can make these lines as thin as you want if you use a really small, fine brush. So I'm kind of mixing it up. So we'll do some lines a little thicker than others. Gives it a little variety. So that maybe there's some deep folds in these petals and some really shallow folds. If you accidentally get some purple in that yellow, no worries at all. You can just blot it out with a paper towel. So notice how I'm kind of mixing up the weights. This petal here especially feels really nice. We'll add a little bit of a shadow in between the two petals. And just make sure you're following kind of the movement of the petal. I don't want it to be like just straight lines. It's nice when there's a little bit of bend that kind of follows the shape of the petal. Hopefully that makes sense. I think using quick and decisive brush strokes here really is going to help you come up with the best result. I think if you're a little too slow, it's going to feel a little bit, maybe a little bit more contrived. There might be a little bit of a shake in it. And for my paintings, I always tend to like them better when I'm a little more decisive and when I move a little more quickly, even if it's not, quote, perfect looking. Lift that out right there. Okay, so I'm going to go in between each petal and drop a little bit of a shadow. So it looks like there's kind of an overlap from one petal to the next. So that just helps to add a little bit of differentiation. You can drop a little bit of extra dark color over here on this right side, which would make sense because we have some shadow on these petals here, so it makes us feel like the sun is coming from this side, or our light source is coming over here from the left. So it would make sense that there'd be some shadow over here as well. Grab a little bit more. My paint is going quickly. Drop a little more shadow here. Maybe a little bit just underneath here as well, underneath these petals where they curl. Okay, so final step, I'm going to go back to final step for the petals. I'm going to go back to my size 6 brush, and I'm cleaning it off so I just have a damp, clean brush. So then I'm going to use just that damp edge, and I'm just going to kind of smooth out some of these paint lines. Some of it dries just a little bit harder than I want. So I'm going to smooth it, lift out a little bit of that color so we have a nice feathered shadow right there. Do the same thing over here. Lift that out just a little bit. Moving my brush along with those lines that we painted into these petals, into those veins. And I'm going to smooth out just a couple of lines, just a little bit here and there, with that damp edge. It's going to help it just feel a little more natural. Just take an inventory here. Something I like to do is I like to squint at my painting as a whole and just see how it's feeling, see how I like it. One petal that I think needs a little more interest is this one right here. So I'm just going to actually add a little bit of dark color here at the end, just a little bit, so it kind of looks like it's not as one-dimensional. And just adding just that tiny bit of darker mix of color. I think it helps it look like there's a little bit more movement in that petal. Okay, so now I'm going to use a color here called Burnt Sienna. And so I'm just activating that color. Actually, I'll switch brushes here. I'm going to switch back to the size 1. So get a lot of color in your brush here. I want a really dark mixture here. And then using the tip of that brush, let's just drop in some little, kind of, I guess these are maybe like little pollen, little bits of pollen here in the stamen. So here in the center of the flower. And I'm just kind of going around the outer edge. Okay. Cleaning my brush, and I'm going to go back to Aureolin Yellow, and I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of Burnt Sienna. And this is just how I paint for real, guys. I just find little tiny bits of real estate on my palette. I mix all my colors right on top of each other. I'm very relaxed about things, and everybody's got their own methods, huh? And I'm just going to drop a couple more little dots in here. I'm blotting it on my paper towel because it looked a little bit too dark. So blotting it here on your paper towel is going to help to lighten the concentration of pigment in your bristles. You can just lift it too if you accidentally go too heavy there. Clean that off here. Just a little bit of water. Comes right off. Okay, so I think one last thing we need is stem. So let's mix. Okay, let's just do, I have a color here called Sap Green. And I'm just going to use pure sap green. It's a very light kind of lime yellow or lime green color. And I'm just going to kind of think that it's going to maybe be coming this way. So I need a little more water in my paint here. I'll follow that little streaky line there. Feels good. I don't like just a straight stem. That feels kind of uninteresting to me. It doesn't feel true to life either. Cosmos have quite a bit of bend in those stems, and cosmos also don't have typical leaves, typical foliage. It's kind of like just like wispy little ruffles. So let's see here. Let's just do, I don't want to overthink this. Just these little kind of lines reaching out. There's kind of these little lost and found little bits. Maybe I'll reach over this way. intersect that stem there. Make sure you're using a small brush for this part. Okay. Yeah, this is feeling nice. All right, so there you have it, a simple purple Cosmo. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are interested in learning more about watercolor, you can join me on Patreon, where I do monthly tutorials on all things. We do composition, watercolor, drawing, cover it all. So you can find out more information in the description below, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.